In a world where many people see reality as a circle or a rectangle, the truth is that issues are cylinders. Rather than a two-dimensional understanding, we will flush out the three-dimension complexities through nuanced conversation and civil, respectable discourse to highlight all perspectives on controversial issues. I'm your host, William Roosh, a high school teacher who's trying to transform education as we know it. Welcome to the Anti-Echo Chamber. This is Cylinder Radio. Hello and welcome to the next episode of Cylinder Radio. I'm your host, Will Roosh, podcaster, school teacher. I don't know what else I am. That's essentially it. But I'm here today and I am excited to dive into a topic about storytelling and the depth of a concept like storytelling and how important it is to humanity as a whole. And I have a great guest today to kind of bring us into that world a little bit. She is a writer, illustrator, podcaster, brilliant artist. Her name is Vesper Stamper. Vesper, thank you for coming on the show. My schedule's been crazy. Your schedule's been crazy. So we finally were able to meet and have this conversation. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, me too. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So tell us a little bit about your background. You know, we're going to talk about storytelling and then the process of writing and being an artist and things like that. So what makes you someone who can kind of help us to, see the cylinder, to help us understand the nuance that we need to really understand in order to move forward with this topic?
Yeah. So I have been an illustrator probably my whole life. I mean, I've been drawing since I could hold a pencil or a crayon. And I come from a pretty difficult background, pretty traumatic childhood. And I don't say that casually or lightly. And it really was story that got me through. It was books. It was mostly fairy tales, not just the reading of them, but also the illustrations and something about that pattern of the hero's journey that all of those great fairy tales are based on. It offered me, in my circumstances, an alternative narrative to what was going on around me, as nothing in my immediate life and my childhood made sense. Like rules didn't seem to apply, like rules of reality didn't seem to apply. And so by having this alternative narrative structure in my life, I was able to navigate it and realize that it wasn't a fait accompli that I was living. I could pursue a different path than the one I was being given. And so as soon as I became conscious that there was this profession called illustration and that I could tell stories through pictures, which is what I had always been doing, that was it. There was no plan B. It was just, I jumped in headlong. And so I've been doing that ever since.
Was it realistic? Was it realistic for you? Were like, I can actually make a living drawing and writing stories and telling stories. Like, was that realistic to you? Because I think a lot of young people who say like, I would love to be an artist, but I can't, so I have to become an accountant or something like that. Like, did you just not have that boundary? I had a couple of really great, as difficult as things were at home and in my family situation, I also had a couple of strokes of fortune. So I had really fantastic grandparents that really believed in me and took it really upon themselves to raise me. And so my grandfather especially was just a very curious person. And so he said, okay, well, this is what you like to do. So let's figure out a way for you to make a living at it, And so he was really the one that helped me navigate through, seeing it as a viable career. But I can't negate the place of my high school. I went to LaGuardia High School of the Arts in Manhattan. And, it was like they took all of the misfits and the weirdos from all 5 boroughs and threw us into one school. And so we were just like happy little, clams swimming around in a tide pool. And so, the emphasis really was on, you're going to make a go of this. You're going to make a living at this. And there was really never a doubt in my mind. Now, when I became an adult and had to actually put those things together, then it got a little bit tricky. But yeah, I mean, I always found a way to kind of I'm scrappy by nature anyway. So it was kind of a good fit. Well, that probably comes from a tough background, right? I mean,
Yeah,
that's the reality of going through hardship is what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, and that's, we're
absolutely.
anti-fragile.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
I actually just did a post. It's great timing. I just did a post on my Instagram of the books that my children. I have a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old, and then one on the way. And
Great.
yeah, I'm stoked. All boys, but we read every night, and
Yeah.
there's a rotation of the books that they really love, and it's a whole bunch of different ones, but they all have like a real theme to them, like a real theme that's like a good life lesson that I want my kids to have. It's not just like, whatever, Billy bought a bunny and the bunny hopped. It's like there's like a real like, okay, they're going to dive into this character, and this character is going to have characteristics that I want my kids to possess, whether it's
Mhm.
diligence or facing your fears, or not flying off the handle, or whatever it is, whatever it is. And I think that's why storytelling is so important. Is it's a way to guide us into a proper way to think and a proper way to approach the world. So we find these kind of archetypical structures, right? Like we
Mhm.
talk about the hero's journey. What's his name?
Joseph Campbell, maybe you're
Joseph
thinking?
Campbell. Yeah.
Yeah,
Like the
yeah.
whole process that the hero goes through and stuff like that. And you watch, all of these themes over and over and over again. Eric Weinstein talks about the portal, and that could be the Matrix, and that could be Wizard of Oz, and all this kind of stuff. Like, how fundamental is that? I'm an outsider. Help me understand, like, how fundamental is it that you get the right structure to your work, that it really connects? Because art, the way I see it, and I'm curious on your thoughts on this. Art is something that is very specific, but it reaches something very general. It's something that's very personal, but connects with other people outside of you. And in order to do that, there has to be something universally true in what you're writing. So how aware are you and how focused are you on those structures?
That's a really good question. So both I'm both very aware of it and also completely unaware of it as I'm working. So I'll unpack that a little bit.
Okay.
So I am now, that I'm far down the road of these, this career that I have, I'm aware of those structures because I've studied them. However, I was completely unaware of them when I was reading them as a kid, or the
Yeah.
stories that I loved were not. I didn't choose them because they had great didactic value to me, or I was really learning a good lesson. I came away and felt like I had a good lesson or something like that. And I don't think that that's what kids, especially, but readers generally, that's not why they pick up a book. That might be why they pick up nonfiction, but that's not why they pick up, a great story. And what I think that any artist who's worth their salt will do is they will just simply tell the truth. So the worst books, for example, and there are, many of them out there, are the ones that start with that kind of lesson and start super aware of the structure and super aware of the lesson that they want to teach, and the morality of it, whether that's a kind of like moralistic tale, like don't smoke and don't drink and don't do drugs, like
Yeah.
it could be that, or it could be you better align with the right political persuasion. That's moralistic too. And there are a lot of books like that out there.
Hmm.
And they're intolerable to read
It's just very on the
because
nose.
it's so on the nose,
Yeah.
and you can smell it from the first 5 pages. And I can't continue with those books. I'm not interested. I feel like I'm being lectured to. Readers really can smell it, and they won't gravitate toward those books. So it can be tough because I write historical fiction. I'm so aware of, standing here in 2021, how certain historical events have played out over time, right? But I can't put 2021 on 1945. I can't put 2021 on 1348. I can't put it on 1961. I can't do that because then I'm not really telling the truth from the character's point of view.
Hmm.
I'm engaging in historical revisionism, which is, we can talk about that, but that's, a completely dangerous game.
So you have to go layers deeper, is what you're saying.
Layers deeper in mostly in the character.
Okay.
So try to if I try to make my characters into Vesper Stamper 2021 or even Will 2021, then I'm missing the point completely. My job as a writer is to tell the character's story, to tell the truth from their point of view. If I'm reading into it from the present, then I'm lying. I'm essentially lying. And I mean, there are people who think that, who kind of cheekily say, well, all art is a lie, right? It's the lie that tells the truth, right? I can't remember who said
Okay.
that, but
Yeah.
it's true. Like, you are making up a fiction story, but you're also trying to be as true to that character, even if that character is completely different than you.
So when you are making, creating this character, do you kind of pick and choose? Because here's the way I think. I think this was a Kurt Cobain quote or something like that, or something
Right
that
on.
he said or wrote. And it was like something like there is no him. He's just picked up pieces of other people that he's met throughout his life and kind of adopted those. And he's this weird hodgepodge of all of these different individuals. There is no like self. There is no him. It's all just pieces of people that he's met and adopted those. And that for some reason like resonated with me. Like I was like, wow, I kind of feel that way too. Like I picked up this from that person, that from that person. That person did that really well, and I admired that, so I want to bring that in. Do you do that with your characters? Do you take like this element of maybe your grandfather and this element of the cashier and then stuff like that? Or do you start from scratch, or is it all kind of like an element of you?
I think it's all of the above. So you're always going to, as much as I'm saying, oh, the character, I can't put Vesper into the character, right? Well, at the same time, I only have my experience of people to draw from. So I try to be a really good student of people. Um, the time in which we're living right now is frustrating for somebody like me, because I really do take people as I find them. And this is something that my grandfather did impart to me. I'm very curious about people. I really I want to understand what makes people tick and why they do and say and think the things that they do, or why they don't think deeply, which a lot of people, unfortunately don't, like, what cuts somebody off from their own curiosity. I'm interested in that. I don't judge that. I want to understand what gets a person to be either, what gets a person to be a Mother Teresa, what gets a person to be a Kurt Cobain, what gets a person to be a Hitler. I want to know, because there may be certain directions I would rather go than others, So I do, I'm really interested in people. I pick up those elements, although there is one little kind of funny game that I play. Like, if you piss me off, you go in a book.
That's funny.
Like, if somebody really pisses me off, they get made into a character. I mean, and I have fun with that. But yeah, hopefully I do enough of a good job disguising them. But
I used to hang out with a bunch of stand-up comedians, and I always be nervous like dating a stand-up comedian. I'm like, I don't want this to get into now.
Yeah.
It's a lot of
You got to be
pressure.
careful. Yeah, you do have to be careful dating artists. You never know if you're going to wind up in their work.
The curiosity about people, you and I sounds like we're the exact same about that. I'm
Right.
so much more interested in why even someone who's really wrong-headed,
Yeah.
by my analysis, or even by objective standards. And then you go, yeah, but why? Like, what was it? Well, they were abused as a kid. It's like, yeah, well, so was this person, and he or she's awesome. So
Yeah.
they got to get, is it the neurochemistry? Is it this? Is it that? Like that stuff? That's really a big part of what's driven me into all this stuff, building a podcast and going on social media and talking to people like you. Like, it's all about just trying to learn about people and what makes them tick and all that kind of stuff. And I think you probably do need to do that if you're going to make realistic characters. You need to know people, because one-dimensional characters, or characters you go, that could never happen, like that's lacking something in the story. And there are enough real stories out there of real people who did real things that are incredible, that there's enough that in the real world to make you go, okay, well, that's incredible and it's real. So
Yeah.
I'm gonna look at that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah,
Really
and I
fascinating.
think, you and I both work in the service of young people and teenagers, right? You teach high
I
school
do. Yeah.
history, right? Um, and so that was a really interesting time of my life because it was really the first time that I really had my own options, right? And it was a time where, I had to really carefully calculate which direction I was going to go in, and I was very painfully aware of like, okay, well, this, my family of origin, made these sets of choices and this was the outcome. And so I can, like, what would happen if I kind of just like swung the other way,
Yeah.
and did the complete opposite, right? Um, in a way that maybe I think as a teenager, as teenagers, we do think very black and white. We want the world to be neat. We want it
Hmm.
to fit in very careful categories. And if we have, for example, difficult relationships with our parents, then the books that we read, there's a part of us that wants to reinforce parents are bad, or like,
Mm.
or religious people are narrow-minded,
Hmm.
or however you want to categorize a group of people as a teenager. And I think there are a lot of those books out there that kind of they narrow down the curiosity instead of expanding it, right? And I think as an author and as an illustrator, like, my job is to just put a whole lot of nuance in the way of my reader, and make them grapple. I
Yeah.
don't like, um I'm not really interested in heroes and villains. As much as we talk
Yeah.
about the hero's journey, like, the hero sometimes is a bad dude,
Yeah. There's different kinds of
Um,
heroes for sure.
right. There's anti-heroes,
Mhm.
and there's sympathetic villains and things like that. And so, um, yeah, I wonder how you deal with that in your classroom, for example.
I mean, this whole cylinder thing. I mean, that started long before in my classroom, long before I was ever on a podcast or at social media. And you know, the way that I try to approach it is like, we're not going to just label slave owners as evil, or you take the extremes, slave owning, Nazism, like the
Right.
worst of humanity, and you just go, if you just chalk them up as evil, then you don't understand them. If you don't understand something, then you don't see it coming down the road when it's rearing its head, or you don't see it in yourself. So
Yeah.
one of the projects that I do, and I actually just assigned this a couple of weeks ago, was in World War II, is I have them research atrocities of World War II. So Unit 731 and the rape of Nanking and Joseph Mengele, and just like horrible, horrible
Yeah.
things. And then I highlight different kinds of evil from Roy Baumeister's book, different like egotism and ideological evil and instrumental evil. And then they have to label the kind of evil that existed. Why did they do that stuff? And then look for that kind of evil in themselves. So even like
Ooh.
sadistic pleasure, they had to say like, yeah, one time I did knock over my little brother's Lego tower because I just wanted to see it fall, and it was funny to see him throw a tantrum. I was like, that's
Sure.
sadistic, and
Right.
like, it's obviously, I'm not saying that they're victim, they're going to be victimizers like on the level of
Yeah.
the Holocaust, but just like that mentality. And
Yeah.
then it's not about ever excusing these horrible behaviors, but it's trying
Correct.
to understand them. And I think that for you to do that for young people is so important right now, when, like you said, we want to hold it up as, this is the good, this is the bad, that's the good guy, that's the bad guy, that's who the good people vote for, that's who the bad people vote for. And then adults even switch over from one side to another. Dave Rubin goes like, I'm on the left, and then he goes, oh my gosh, the left is crazy, I'm going to go over to the right. It's like, well,
Hmm.
no, like there's a lot of nuance in
Yeah.
between that you're missing out on when you just switch teams. But
Right.
it's easier. It's easy. But we like to do that to a young mind, is to structure them into that easy pathway of the binary, seems like
Yep.
a really dangerous idea. So I'm
Well,
glad that
I
you're
mean,
not buying into that.
no. And in
Yeah.
fact, so I'll just state from the outset, I am apolitical.
Mm-hmm.
Politics to me is intensely boring. Um, Now, we have to pay attention to it because it's directing people's decisions. But I find it really baffling how people choose team red or team blue or whatever, and they literally build their whole life narrative around those things. And
Yeah.
I literally don't understand that. Like, there's not a part of me that that understands or is interested in doing that. So, and I think that that's because, look, I grew up in New York City. I'm a third generation New Yorker. Um, I don't have the same experience as somebody, let's say, who grew up in the suburbs of some Midwestern small town. My experience is very different. I grew up around all kinds of different people in every way that you can be different. I'm an artist. I went to, I've done 10 years of art school. None of my friends or colleagues or associates are like any kind of predictable,
Yeah.
set of people, and and I also grew up in the New York City of the 90s. When you said Kurt Cobain, I mean, like, I came of age under grunge, like that, and even that, I wasn't even grunge because I was too much of a hippie to be grunge, so
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
um, but one of the values that we really internalized at that time was anti-censorship,
Hmm.
because this was when you had, the whole like Ralph Reed, moral majority, Newt Gingrich, NEA, Robert Mapplethorpe, Andre Serrano, like that whole maelstrom that was happening in the 90s at that time. And we as artists coming of age, like, we had to grapple with those issues. And where at least I am seeing a lot of my friends, unfortunately, like, fall to this current spate of censorship. But where we came down on at the time was censorship was evil. It was like,
Yeah.
and also, that was also right at the time of, the fall of the Berlin Wall and the Soviet Union. And, we all, like, I had camp counselors, for example, who were Russian exchange students, who had experienced this. And I was like, I'm never going to uh, tell somebody what to think or do anything that would make me want to put them in a prison camp, or like, the subject of like political prisons, anything like that. It was like, I, that's so anathema to the way that I think. So I find myself now, and I know I'm not the only one. I mean, it's really the majority of people that I talk to are like, I don't even know how to navigate the time I'm in,
Okay.
and so,
Yeah.
yeah,
I'm sorry.
because,
Let's go into this because this
yeah,
is
sure,
this is
sure.
I think we're getting right to it, to like the core here,
Yeah.
the nice gooey
Groovy.
center of what's going on.
Yeah.
Yeah, because artists, let's say it's like right brained, and let's say it's like the more openness, free, if there has to be order and chaos, it's more chaotic, blah, 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 stuff like that. Okay. So that means
That's a
openness to
stereotype, but sure.
it is for sure. I'm overly simplifying it for sure.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead.
That concept of like, openness to experience and all that kind of stuff is freeing, blah, blah, blah. Okay. So yeah, like in the George Bush years, W. Bush, okay, George
Yeah.
W. Bush, it was like our morals need to be the morals. It was that like Christian right like push. And it was like, no, don't tell me how to live my life. Like, morals are complex. Don't tell me I have to live by your morals. And that
Hmm.
was agreed upon. And then what is going on with artists, Vesper?
I
Artists,
don't.
it's a real disturbing thing because art is art is the shapers of our culture. And when it seems like all of the artists are on one side of the political spectrum, all of the artists are just, they're becoming so the beautiful thing about artists is,
Mhm.
I don't know where their brains are going to go next. Like, that's the thing, that's the cool thing about that kind of wild brain. But then how do they become so authoritarian when it's like, no, this is the right moral thing? I have my own kind of thoughts on this that I
Mhm.
can go into, but just initially, like, what is your first kind of reaction to what is going on with artists right now, and how they're so just like cookie cutter on the way that they think about controversial issues or societal issues or something like that?
Mhm.
You have a room of 100 artists and you can guess the way they all think along this line. Now, you said that they don't, but me on the outside, it seems like they do. So either they're not speaking up,
Mhm.
or they're not giving a platform, or what. So what's going on here?
Okay. Yeah. So it's incredibly complex, and I'm still trying to figure this out, and I'm trying to work with the artists that I know. Um, so Jonathan Pajot talks about this a lot, and I recently gave a talk about this, about the artist is we all know that the artist is kind of a weird case in humanity, right?
Mhm.
There's a reason people think that we're odd or whatever, and it is because, like, I believe that artists are created with a specific function in society. We're made the way that we are on purpose, and we do have that openness. If you want to talk about the big five, personality
Yeah.
test or whatever, although I score completely equally on openness and conscientiousness, so go figure.
No. Yeah.
um, yeah, it's kind of odd, but we're meant to live on the margin. That's what artists are meant to do.
Mhm.
So if you think of it as like a circular, think of a big dinner plate. Okay, think of a flat earth. Okay.
Mhm.
I'm not a
Yeah.
flat earther, but think of the flat earth for a second. Okay, so like on the dinner plate, you have everything that's normal. You have politics, you have the kingdoms of this world, let's say. Okay, you
Mhm.
have going to the grocery store, raising your family, like the normie stuff. Okay. And then on the outside of that dinner plate, you have the monsters. You have all that is like not supposed to enter the normal world, right? Well, artists live right on the rim of that dinner plate. And we're meant to translate back and forth between, like, we see the monsters, and there's a certain part of us that, like, we get the monsters.
Mhm.
We also, but we're not meant to live out there in the monster land, and we're not meant to live in the normie land either. We're supposed to be border watchers. We're supposed to be able to tell the normies what the monsters are doing and tell the monsters what the normies are doing. Does that make sense
It
at
does.
all?
I'm with
Okay.
you so far. Yeah.
Okay. So when an artist steps out of that, out of their place in that margin, and they don't understand that that's where they belong. So you have a lot of artists that feel awful because they don't fit anywhere, and they
Mhm.
always feel abnormal. That's because we're not, okay? We're not special, but we're not normal either. Well, when artists get out into the monster land and they hang out too long there, then you have all sorts of things like addiction and self-destruction and mental
Mhm.
illness, all of that stuff. But when they get too much in normie land, then you get stuff like propaganda. And I think that that's sort of where we are. I think what has happened in large part is, like, with the internet and social media, even though there's great things about it for artists because we can put our work out there, and there's a lot of exposure, there's also what's happening to everybody else with this pressure to conform. And artists are falling prey to that. And it's like, it's just a little bit safer in a way to kind of live on in the normie land. And the challenge to artists is that we have to get back out on the margins where we belong, because society needs us to be that, because the artists are the ones who tell the truth about what's going on. And you see this in under totalitarian movements. It's always the artists who are at the forefront of dissident movements,
Yeah.
and that's by design. And so, like, for instance, in World War II, in Theresienstadt, the concentration camp Theresienstadt, that is where the Nazis sent all the artists. And by day, they had a graphic design firm in
Mhm.
Theresienstadt.
Mhm.
And by day, the Nazis would have them um, drawing propaganda posters and putting together these beautiful plans for, like, imperial you know urban design and all of these things, right? But at night, these artists would sneak the art materials from that graphic design studio, and they would go and draw what was really happening. They would draw the inside of the ghetto, you know, where people were actually living, or like the carts of dead bodies and things like that. And they would roll those drawings up and hide them in the wall, because they were
Mhm.
storing away that truth for when it was the right time for it to emerge, or when they would find an opportunity to be able to tell that,
What was the name of the
right?
camp?
Theresienstadt.
Oh, I
If
didn't know.
you know the book, I Never Saw Another Butterfly,
I don't know.
which was
Oh, I
children's
do. Yes,
drawings
yes,
from
yes, I do.
yeah
I do. I
children's
have a
drawings from
yeah.
Terezin. So
Yes,
that's
yes.
yeah. So that concentration camp, it was a whole town that they commandeered and put all of the artists and intellectuals there. And you can visit it today. It's actually it went back to being a inhabited town. It's the creepiest place I've ever been in my life. It's just
Uh,
an hour north of Prague. It's
okay.
well worth a visit if you ever can.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know Jordan Peterson has filled up I mean, he's, crazy in his own way, but he's filled up his whole house with propaganda,
Yeah.
Nazi and
Yeah.
a lot of Soviet propaganda. It's beautiful art,
Right.
but that's, I
Right.
mean, and that's what it is. And I think artists are susceptible to the same, whatever, the same allure to money and power and
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff. You look at Hollywood, like
Absolutely.
that's very intriguing. And then you have to, you want to be a movie star, you want to get into the clubs, you want to get people to like you. I mean, there's that level of it too.
Hmm.
But I'm with you. We need artists right now. We need, and
Yeah.
I made a Instagram video maybe over a year ago now saying like we need artists to unify the country, and it's not there. Part of what I'm going at with this is, um, we have like life is complex, clearly. And we've had like ancient books to kind of guide us through wisdom. So it could be like religious texts or something like that. And this is kind of going into like Jonathan Peugeot stuff a little bit,
Hmm.
but with those religious texts, it gives you some guidance that's been long fought and accumulated, thousands and thousands of years and all that kind of stuff. And we've abandoned a lot of those traditional stories. I mean, even in my realm in education, they're banning books, To Kill a
Yeah.
Mockingbird or Great Gatsby. We don't need to teach another book about white people, and they use racist slurs. Tom says racist slurs, so let's not use those books and all that kind of stuff. And then
Yeah.
they're replacing them. So going to like How to Live Your Life, they're replacing those kinds of like religious books, and then just like What to Teach in Class, The Crucible, Lord of the Flies. Like, they're not teaching The Crucible right now, like witch hunts. So what are we replacing them with? And it seems like they're replacing it with something that has not stood the test of time. They're
Correct.
replacing it with this, BIPOC author who has this viewpoint, and it was published in 2012. It's like, well, we don't know. Like, art has to hold up, stand the test of time. And I worry about how people just don't necessarily are going now. They don't know right from wrong. They don't know up from down. So they look for something very obvious, something like racism, and they say, well, racism is clearly wrong. I know that, so I'm going to go all in on racism is bad. And then if someone is a racist, then I'm going to go all in, bad, they're bad, all of that kind of stuff. And I don't know, is the loss of these great works of art and these great stories, is it leading to us being more of like the blind leading the blind? What do you
Oh
think?
gosh, there is so much to unpack there.
Yeah.
I mean, of like, where do I go? Okay, so first of all, just back to the propaganda thing for 1 second. So
Yeah.
I know another young adult author who's Black, whose um, mother filled his house with extremely racist um,
Hmm.
Southern advertisements and, dolls and all of these things. And it was for the same reason that Jordan Peterson does it, which is to like, maybe if I am so hyper aware, of
Mhm.
how gross this stuff is, where I'm living in it times 10 saturated,
Wow.
then I'll be more sensitive to see it and to be able to like avoid it in the larger world. Okay. And that is like, no. So I went to a yard sale recently and I saw this beautiful oil painting of Vladimir Lenin. I was so
Wow.
tempted,
Like
because I'm writing a
original.
book. It was an original paint. Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, it was just, who knows who did it, but
Yeah.
like, I was so tempted to buy it because I'm writing a book about the Berlin Wall right now. So I'm like
Uh-huh.
doing a deep dive into communism and, I'm trying to steel man it. I'm trying to be fair and whatever,
Yeah.
but like, I'm like, oh, maybe I should get this. And I decided not to because I'm very like visually overstimulated anyway. So I just, and also like this history is so troubling. I didn't need more
Oh my
saturation with
gosh.
it. Like
Yeah.
I'm already way too sensitive. But so I think that artists are like, if you're looking to whoever's popular right now or whoever's got the most followers right now or whatever, and you're looking and they're all capitulating to this conformist political movement, that's not where you need to look, because those
Right.
those are the people, those are the voices that are in the establishment,
Yeah.
and so
Yeah.
Like they're not going to give you what they're looking for, what you're looking for. They are part of the establishment. So if you're looking for the more reasonable voices, they're going to be another level down from that,
Yeah,
you
you can't
know?
speak truth to power and have a deal with Nike. Like, but like, you know what I mean? Like, that's the stuff that's going on here. And
Correct.
Nicole Hannah Jones is talking about we're just going to be fighting the power. You're a Pulitzer Prize winner. You're the top, person at the biggest, the newspaper. You have a
Mhm.
Netflix deal. You like no, like that. You can't. That's not the way that this
Then,
that this works. That's not
yeah,
punk rock.
it's not punk rock. It's not, and that's exactly right. We do need to recover a sense of that punk rock. Okay, there's so much. Okay, so those, I'm not going to call anybody out like by name in particular, but just in terms of like, who the artists are who are part of the establishment. All right. And they, I'm going to be a little bit crass here and just say like, that is where propaganda comes from. Propaganda comes from the approved establishment. And they're going to like the things that are going to get created for that are going to be, they're going to toe the party line. And that's why you see all these cancellations and banned books and everything like that, because those things threaten the party line. It's not necessarily even that they are um, that these books are like evil in themselves or whatever. They just
No.
do not fit into the narrowing window, right? And as an artist trying to create and speak truth, not just I don't care about speaking truth to power in my own work or whatever.
No.
I'm just trying to tell the
Truth.
truth,
Yeah.
like
Yeah, I do.
of whatever this character is experiencing, whatever historical events they're living through, that they're trying to grapple with themselves, Um, and it's so, am I gonna win some sort of like, fancy award for that? Probably not. Like I've already kind of made my peace with that. I'd be very surprised if I got nominated for any more awards. My first book did. My first book did very well in the award space. It was a book about the Holocaust. Um,
But if they
and
did, Vesper, if they, whatever the they is,
Yeah.
these gated institutions, these gatekeepers, if they say like, hey, like we like this, let's do this here. They dangle some money your way, dangle some fame your way, dangle like a big spread in the Atlantic your way, or whatever it is, like all of that kind of stuff. Like, how do you keep your eye on the prize? How do you keep your eye on truth?
Mhm.
Because we are, like I said, we are all susceptible to this. I think about
Yeah.
that a lot. Like, I think
Yeah.
about what would happen if Jimmy Fallon said, hey, we got a high school teacher coming on, let's go. Like how do I not buy into all that? Am I just like, oh, I'm immune to falling into these pitfalls that everyone else seems to fall into? They give up a
Hmm.
little bit of their integrity, just a little
Yeah.
bit, to get this massive reward, then a little bit more, and then a little bit more, and then now you're lost. Is it? I mean, you've watched artists because you're from this, an art school. So have you watched them go through that process of, lack of a better term, it's a crappy term, but like selling out?
Well, it like when I was coming
Or
of
how does
age,
that
it's the worst
go?
thing you could
Yeah.
do, right? Like
Yeah. Yeah.
selling out was like, it was almost like if you were successful, you had failed, you know?
Yeah.
And okay, but I come from an illustration background. I don't come from like a gallery art background, which is
Mhm.
like, so I was always going to be more of a communicator, more of a sense of responsibility about my viewers and my readers, but let's just back up and
Okay.
just ask your question a different way, because
Okay.
I feel
Yeah.
like
How did
I wish that we were not doing like a pod. I wish we were just sitting on the sofa
and
and talking like for 5 hours, because
I
there's
think we
so
need more
much.
time. I know, because this is so complex. But
Yeah.
how does that happen? How does someone with integrity, a true artist,
Right.
fall to becoming a propagandist?
Okay. So, all right. So every artist knows inherently, no matter how tortured they are or how whatever. Look, I know I have a superpower. I can draw pictures. Okay. I walk into any room and I start drawing a picture, and like 99% of people are like amazed by that. Okay. They think I'm like superwoman. They
Yeah.
don't know anything else about me except that I can like pick up a pen and I can draw something realistically, quote
Yeah. Yeah.
unquote. Okay. And like a lot of people are amazed by that. Right. And so there's always going to be the temptation for the artist to, because we always feel like so weird and so like, like outsider and margin and all of this stuff, that when you get the slightest little stroke of approval from somebody over what you can do, you start to invest more and more of your self-worth and your self-identity in that superpower, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you don't even realize it's happening. And then you start to believe your own press. So I was a touring musician. My husband and I were touring musicians for some years. And we were written up in all of the, Pitchfork, and, we got great reviews and whatever. And then that one bad review would come. And my husband was like really devastated by it. I think, I didn't really put a whole lot of stock in it, but it would really bother him. But at the time, I was raising two little toddlers. So my life was like, I was like covered in bodily fluids all the time and like chewed up food. And, so the music that I was making and the accolades we were getting in different publications, whether it was positive or negative, those people didn't know anything about my life. My life was extremely just real, and we were poor, like we were poor, we were on government assistance, and so like, it didn't matter like if we had a glossy, photo somewhere, or if we had a superpower that meant like we could get up on a stage and play guitar and not be nervous about it or whatever and make good music. So I don't know. I think maybe something about having kids kept me humble or whatever. Like we just didn't have a whole lot of props to lean on. And also, I mean, a big part of this is that I'm a Christian. And so I don't put a whole lot of stock in this world. Like the kingdom that I belong to is not of this world. Like like I love the world,
Yeah. Of course.
it's an amazing place. I've been all around the world. I've sat with people from all over the world and like been in people's homes in slums and, and like, and experienced like the beauty of that kind of hospitality and been to like the mountaintop, right? Like, but at the end of the day, like I have like a very kind of distinct awareness of my own mortality, and that my worth doesn't come from anything that I bring to the table. It's like I'm just loved by God as everybody else is. And that's like where my life comes from, So I feel like, am I immune to the temptations of ego or of the fear of conformity? Or of course I'm immune just like anybody else. I mean, I'm not immune, just like anybody else is not immune to that. Right. But I keep myself on a very, very, very short leash in terms of my my self-worth and my ego. Does that make sense?
It does. And I think it actually makes a lot of sense. And it also provides a bit of a roadmap for people who want to avoid those pitfalls. When I talk about losing the books of ancient wisdom, I'm talking about, I mean, a lot of religion, but in particular, let's just say like, Judeo-Christian belief or Christianity,
Sure.
like there are ways that people act. And again, there's a lot of people that call themselves Christian, but they don't act,
Of course.
Christ-like, far from it. So the, that there are these things that you can do, part of Christianity is also like doing what you believe to be right, or what is in line with the teaching is right, and not venturing from that. So, if something feels like, oh, this doesn't feel right, this feels like I'm doing something wrong, standing up for what is right. And I think that cowardice has become the norm. I think there's a lot of people that are scared to stand up. They're scared to get labeled a certain way. It's like, that's another Jordan Peterson thing. He's like, everyone likes to think that they would hide a Jew in their attic, but traditionally, no. And you look at like, who won't even stand up for someone because they're scared of being labeled with a bad name, not murdered, but just being called a bad name or looked at in a cross-eyed way. So we've just become so cowardly And one
Mhm.
of the things that's a theme from those books I was talking about that I read to my kids is like, you know, confronting your fears, you know, slaying
Mhm.
the dragon, at least confronting the dragon.
Mhm.
And that's another thing that I think is really important that we need to bring back through art, like stop vilifying strength. And I'm not, you know, it's not just physical strength. It's just like, no, the strength to stand up to the crowd. Like that's what heroes have
Or
always
strength
done.
of mind.
Yeah.
I don't understand why we're fetishizing like your life falling apart. We fetishize that,
Yeah.
you know? And I kind of made a rule for myself recently. I mean, I'm always analyzing how to navigate where we are right now. And one rule that I have is like, I'm just, I'm not going to let anybody else define the terms for me.
Yeah.
Um, but one thing is that I also am not going to take my cues on how to live my life from people who I believe are fundamentally unhappy. I mean, I hate to, you know, it's
Uh,
like I had really good people in my life that got me through really shitty times. Okay.
yeah.
Like legit, you know, like stuff from my childhood is still being unpacked like by relatives of mine that are telling me stuff I didn't even realize was happening. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And like, but I had really good people in my life that taught me that I could be strong.
Yeah.
And you're not going to find a tougher broad than me. I mean, really, like, you know, I'm very tough minded, and I'm proud of myself about that. You know, like
Yeah.
I'm really happy with my life. I can stand on my own 2 feet. If I lost, you know, if I lost everything, I really do know that I'd be okay because I have been without. And I think that, you know, I think so much of this outrage and this fear, um, it comes from, well, first of all, it comes from a fear of death.
Mm.
You know, it like a fundamental fear of death because why else would you have to define your life by so many externals unless you were just like afraid around every corner, right? But it's also like, oh, I just lost my train of thought about that. But I'll come back there. Happiness. Are you going to edit this?
Yeah, I can. Yeah.
We were on a pretty
Typically,
good
I'll
roll.
do
You know,
that.
no, you don't have to. You don't
No,
have
it's
to.
fine. I mean,
But
this is, I mean, no, there's a lot of people who it's almost like a race to the bottom. It's like I have been, you know, am through this. You've wronged me in so many ways and things like that. It's like I don't.
oh, I remember what I was going to say.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
please, yeah.
Yeah. I think that so much of this is actually a problem of affluence. I think that
Mm,
the people who are most afraid of losing everything are people who have so much to lose. You know, like they're not people who have grown up in the bottom or like hit rock bottom or whatever. It's often people who recognize that they actually have like a lot of safety nets that
yeah,
they have to protect and uphold. And I didn't have that, you know,
yeah,
and I still don't. I don't have a lot of safety nets in my life. I don't have um I don't have a lot to protect. I don't have wealth. I don't have status. Do you know what I mean?
yeah. I do.
I'm not upper class. You know, I come from working class background. Um, I know I'll be okay. You know,
Yeah.
at the same time, like, am I am I aware that I do have things to lose? Yes, I am aware of that. But the things that I stand to lose are not they're not going to crush me. Like I'm scrappy. I can reinvent.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, well, you're in New York City too. I mean, that's like the mecca. I mean, it is in LA too, but like that's like a lot of the, you know, whatever Upper East Side, Upper West Side, wealthy people that have had, you know, wealth, and then they want to like help the poor, but a good shepherd
They don't
smells
know.
like sheep, and they're not
Yeah,
in
no,
those
no.
communities.
Yeah, they're no, and this is something that you know, if you there's so much I could say there, but like, I really tire of people who claim to speak up and represent for people that they don't even know, or who think that the people they're standing up for, or claim to stand up for, are all of one mind. For example, like, oh, that there's this or that community. No, there's not this or that community. There's individuals, that are grouped according to a very arbitrary characteristics.
Yeah,
And
that's something I've had on my podcast. Like I've had a bunch of different I mean, just every way that you can do it. I love the guests I've had where people are like, wait, people like that exist? I had no idea that kind of thing existed. There was like a MAGA hat wearing hardcore immigrant trans person. It's like, wait, what? Like,
okay, see?
Yeah. Well, that's
and you know
that's
what?
humans.
And those are the people that should be characters in books.
Yeah.
Because those people exist, and that's the truth. And if you think that, if you think, for example, like, oh, like all Black people are Democrats or something like that, or all Black people are, go to church or so, then whatever. It's like, then you don't know enough Black people. Sorry. And you don't get to speak for a community that you don't know.
Yeah, that is a problem. People don't have diverse relationships.
They don't.
They have, if they are friends with, whatever, like Hispanic person, they're friends with like, two people, and they're in the same environment. They think the same.
And they're probably in the same socioeconomic class as that person. And that really goes to, like, if you are only friends with people in your class, that to me is a lot more of a defining factor, class.
Yeah.
Than any of these characteristics that we're talking about.
Big difference. Yeah.
Huge.
And yet we're that's not brought up nearly enough, because there's very clearly is an us versus them in that one. And not to say that the upper class are evil by any stretch, because someone's doing really important things, but there is a level of like, oh, those people who are telling us to hate each other, they're all sipping scotch and tea together.
I heard them described recently as Chardonnay Antifa. I was like, that is some excellent wordcraft right there.
Yeah.
Oh, I took that one with me. I'm using that.
Vesper, how do we get our artists back? How do we get them back? Because you said that you have friends who are artists who see this, who see the things that you and I are talking about, who recognize it, but I don't see them. And again, maybe it's because Good Shepherd smells like sheep. And I am friends with artists. I'm in LA and I'm friends with artists, but I mean, the vast majority of my friends who are artists are very much in line with the status quo. And they'll say, Kamala Harris is great because she's a Black woman and we have a Black woman vice president. I'm like, but what about like undo a scroll? Like, and again, it's because they're out of their lane talking about politics, and like they're just following the easy route, which is this is what's a good policy. This is what's a bad policy. This helps people. This is bad. This person, Donald Trump is a big orange bully. True, so he's bad. Joe Biden has a big smile on his face, and Kamala Harris is this kind of cool, funky aunt. So it's all good, and they're being. I think my friends who are artists who are very like towing the line, I think they're being duped, but I don't know if that's fair. I don't know if that's like accurate. I think they're soft-hearted people, and the soft-hearted people. That's one of my biggest issues with like a lot of the critical theory stuff. And James Lindsay broke this down in a way, even though he's kind of heartless in some ways. Like the way he said, he's like, it takes, I've watched this too. I've watched really soft-hearted, kind people, school teachers, artists, people like that. And then they get kind of shaped and hardened by this authoritarian, us versus them, bad guys, make race the most important concept, race, gender, blah, blah, blah. They become hardened, and it's so hard for me to watch, but I watch it over and over again happening. How do we stop it? How do we get it back?
I don't know necessarily, because I've had this happen to me where other artists, go down this road and their personalities change and they become different people, and they become nasty.
Yeah.
And they become the kind of person that you could see shooting you over a pit, Yes.
Yes.
And so I Look, there are associations forming of artists, of like-minded artists who are really trying to keep our foot in the door. We're just trying to keep our foot in the door and keep it from closing, by doing good work. So there are those of us. I'm friends with many.
Okay.
The ones that turn, I think it's almost like you have to be kind,
Mm-hmm.
keep the door open, be hospitable, keep inviting them to your parties,
Mm-hmm.
whatever, and showing them that you care about them. Not just that you're a nice person, but that you care about them. You're genuinely concerned for their welfare. But the time is now to begin to draw boundaries, because I'm not saying excluding people, but I'm saying drawing good boundaries. When you start to see people, artists, whoever, go down this path, I'm saying that it's a closing of the mind. That's what I'm generally talking about, is a closing of the mind. And because I'm apolitical, I'm not going to I want to hold space for everybody to have their opinions. I really do. Like, I want that kind of open society back, into the extent that we already had it, But I just think, like, refusing to play by these rules of narrowing, that's what we have to do. And it's funny, though. It's like people have a way of finding each other. You sort of like, you test the language a little bit, and you can tell kind of, are people still open? Are they still thinking their own thoughts? Okay, well, then we can have a conversation. But if somebody is not interested in doing that, well, maybe you'll keep it at, well, I'll see you at the company party.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's
I'm trying to hold it open for my fellow artists. I really am. I'm trying to do what I can. I'm trying to still present that kind of open, kind of punk rock worldview.
it's
And
disturbing to
yeah,
watch, Vesper, like watching after I'm a history teacher. So after what was happening to artists and actors in the 1950s with the blacklists and
yeah,
all that, it's the same thing, but it's racist, or it's anti LGBTQ, or whatever, whatever it is. And it's just like that. Oh, you get the Scarlet Letter, you get blacklisted. Roseanne lost her job. I'm not like, how much of
yeah,
an artist. She's a stand-up comedian and everything like that. And she said
yeah,
something
sure.
insensitive, but
Mhm.
there's a clear one way. Like, what she did was, I mean, it was like, I don't know, it was whatever. But like,
Look,
I don't
yeah,
know. But
look. As a writer,
yeah,
I deal with language, and I deal with image. So I'm very, very sensitive to language games, like semantic games.
oh, changing the definitions and stuff.
Yes.
Yeah.
And this is where, every totalitarian movement begins with the changing of language. And at the Museum of Jewish Heritage in New York, in Battery Park, I'm not sure if the exhibit is still there, but in one exhibit that they had a whole wall painted with Nazi euphemisms,
Hmm.
and what the word that the Nazi would use and what it actually meant. So, for example, you had resettlement in the East, which really meant deportation to a death camp,
Yeah.
or the word farm was
Hmm.
really concentration camp.
Yeah.
And there, it was a whole wall of these things. And so when you start to see, look, I've been fighting racism consciously and openly and fervently since I was 9 years old. When I first became aware of race, my
Hmm.
best friend was Black. And I was 9 years old. I will never forget it, And it was
Yeah.
like I made it my life mission that wherever I saw this evil, this poison of racism, I would fight it with whatever tools I had in my hand. Except that, 3-4 years ago, the definition of racism changed, right? And so you had this ideological capture where those of us who really, like, we thought we were sort of like making a lot of progress against racism, and that most people that we came across were not racist, and we had, very good relationships with people of different races.
Hmm.
And even the concept of race to me is so pseudoscientific. I don't even
It
engage
is.
in it. But, but when good-hearted people who think that they're like already in one stream of like fighting this evil thing, when the definition is changed, they hop in the stream, in the new stream, and they don't realize that they're actually being manipulated. They're actually being played with. There is a game being played that's over their heads.
Yeah.
And so I don't know how to get that back, or to like recapture that semantic truth, except to just live it, and
Yeah.
hope that the testimony of my life and my relationships bears out what I really believe. you
Well,
know
and make art that might connect with people. I mean,
right.
the fact that it's not really a left right thing, but let's just say like the left has like more artists on board with like pushing that political agenda, it's just better. So the production value is going to be better, and people connect with
True.
those stories. Like, it's both sides are empathetic. We're all empathetic. It's just who tells the better story. And
Hmm.
there's a better story about whatever, like some poor black woman doing this than some straight white guy who might have had a really tough time, or a unbelievable story of heroism or whatever it is, but just because of his race or because of his gender, then he's just not given that story. And there's so much there that I think is really a problem. But if we have artists to tell the stories that aren't being told, like there was a long time where the story of colored people, or jeez, the story of
Oh, careful there.
the story of of gay people, or whatever it is, of Native American, whatever it is, okay, they weren't being told. And it's important
Right.
to tell those stories. Like, that's what the Harlem
Absolutely.
Renaissance was all about. Like, that's really important.
Yeah.
But now we're moving it. We're like, I don't want to hear the story of Jeremy Martis, this 6-year-old kid who was shot by cops, because it doesn't fit this narrative. So we're not going to tell
Hmm.
that story. But that's a horrible, tragic story. Or there's so many over and over and over again that I think we need artists to write songs that'll be about the human experience and
Yeah.
not about the breaking off, because we're empathetic. It's like, be kind, be kind, be kind. Love trumps hate. But if you got a red MAGA hat on, I will kill you. And
Yeah.
I've seen like these soft artists, you could tell, like you said, they would stand over a pit. They would kill you. They're
Yes, they would.
filled with rage. And yet if
Hmm.
you ask them like, well, why? They get so fired up at even the question, and because they also can't articulate it.
Right.
So it's a real mess, and we need artists to help us get out of this, because logic, or me like pontificating about heterodox ideas, isn't going to
Hmm.
get there. We have to
Yeah.
attach people. We have to meet people in their souls and their hearts and their emotions, and that's what artists do.
Yeah. And I think, for myself as a Christian, the governing principle that I have is that every single person walking around, you, me, everybody, is absolutely on fire with the glory of God. Like, we are
Mhm.
absolutely, like, it's not just about dignity. Okay. Dignity stops so short of the absolute glory that is within people. Like, everybody is endlessly fascinating.
Yeah.
They may not realize it. They may not even know how to tell their own story, but every single person, right? And so it's up to people who believe that kind of thing, whether you're a Christian or not, whether but there are people that have a similar kind of view on people,
Mhm.
and it's up to people like that to just simply refuse to back down. Now, getting to, the history of artistic dissidence, right? Like, people like Václav Havel, the Czech playwright who became, after the fall of communism, he became the president of Czechoslovakia. He is one of my great heroes. But, because he's an artist, he was an artist, and he suffered. And, that's what's going to wind up happening. Okay. You're starting to see it with, we'll call it cancellations, but it's really purges. Okay.
Mhm.
It's censorship, and it's purges. And those people who are being pushed out, they have a choice. They can apologize and kowtow and get back in the good graces, which they won't, or they can embrace the status of being a dissident and be willing to suffer for the truth. And that's what's going to have to happen. And I'm sorry to say it. Now, yeah, okay, like maybe the millions and billions of dollars of like the movie industry, for example, are not going to be there for those people to fully realize the work that they want to make, right? But they're going to find ways to do what they can, you know?
Yeah.
Like Salman Rushdie is still going to continue to be Salman Rushdie. Okay. Like Lionel Shriver is going to continue to be Lionel Shriver. Like brilliant writers, brilliant artists are still going to find their ways to make beautiful work. And maybe it's going to have to be that they do like Samizdat publishing, you know, they do self-publishing or whatever, and that's how the work gets distributed. But artists always find a way. Or like artists who are, you know, you don't want to have to be in the position of being a dissident, but like they find there are dissident groups of artists in Cuba right now who are really suffering.
Yeah.
Just for the ability to make art that is conscientious and doesn't follow the party line, you know, of the Castro regime.
And we're seeing it with like some like Matt Taibbi, Barry Weiss, Glenn Greenwald in the journalism realm are like, nope, I'm not playing this game. You see it with stand-up comedians, you know, Tim Dillon or Andrew Schultz, like, nope, you know, some stand-up comedians are really like pushing out. I think they're kind of free. And then I hope it finds its way into, you know, like literature, you know, all kinds of different kinds of artists. Really, music, I think, needs it. I think music is
we're in a
really
dearth of music right now. As a musician, I can say this. Like, I'm like, where is the music? Where is it?
What a time for music. Like, I love teaching the 1960s, especially, and like, you know, Vietnam and civil rights and all those music. We just sit around in my class and listen to music for like days and days and days of that unit. Where is it right now? This is so prime. We need guidance from these musicians who are just like, you know, stop, look around.
Well, that's why it's not going to come from the top. That's, I mean, I think that's like the ultimate point. It is not going to come from the top. The top is captured.
SoundCloud. Go to SoundCloud.
Like, it's got to be like, for instance, I just started a singing club at my house. Okay. We had like 5 people sitting around my fire pit.
Cool.
We sang the Beatles. We sang old, like, spiritual 60s spirituals. We sang 80s pop, you know, and we did it. It was sloppy, it was bad, you know, but we sang together. And it was just like, if it kills me, I'm going to find a way to bring people together, even if it's 5 people around my fire pit. Cause I'm simply not going to give my life away to people who don't know me, don't know what I'm about, don't even care what I'm creating, you know, frankly. It's just like, those people don't get a vote. Like, I'm very, very careful in my own life about who gets a vote on me.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah. Well, I think that helps the fact that you have a family, you have like those like basic structures that you need for stability in your life. And people who don't have those I think they're more likely to go where the wind kind of tosses them, because they don't have as many anchors. You know, Christianity is another huge anchor that I've seen. Now, watch these patterns, having these conversations. I've done something like 90 podcasts now with very different kinds of people, talk to people every day from all different backgrounds. And like, there are certain anchors that when people have those things, what you tie your identity up to, you know, if your identity is the color of your skin, that's one thing. But if your identity is, you know, a child of God and, you know, a believer in Christ or whatever it is, like, that's a very different kind. It's a much deeper level of rooted than some of these other immutable characteristics, you know, whatever it is, skin color, or, you know, it's, I don't know. Vesper, we did an hour and 15 minutes already. I usually end at like 40 minutes, but I think there's just so much depth to this. I don't even know if we got anywhere. I think we're just kind of just trying to figure it out, but I really enjoyed the conversation. Where can people, you know, follow you, your work, and kind of get behind what you're doing?
Yeah. So the main I'm not on Twitter or Facebook anymore. I dumped those.
Okay.
Cause I refuse to play by those rules. But I am on Instagram. So because I'm an illustrator, you can see my work there. It's Vesper Illustration. It's easy to find. VesperIllustration.com. And my podcast is called Vesperisms, The Art of Thinking for Yourself. And that's been a really fun experiment, since this past year, just trying to give people a place to listen to a different perspective that's not coming from a political worldview, but an artistic one. But it seems to be touching on a lot of kind of where we're at right now and just giving people a different way to think. So that's Vesperisms. And I'm on Patreon, Locals, and ThinkSpot as well.
Okay. All right, cool. Yeah, I love how you open up your podcast on YouTube with, an artistic worldview. And I actually wrote that down. We didn't talk about it, but like, I really love that. And I think that you're one of the people that I can steer my artist friends who I think are a little lost in the political world, maybe steer them towards your work, kind of this kind of thinking, because
send them my way.
Yeah, because I think that they need to find people. I'm sometimes too up here. I'm too like logical. I'm like, look at this, blah, 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 blah. Look at it, and look, what about the neurochemistry of this? And so they're just like, nah, bro, that's not the way I work. So I think that you got to find someone who speaks kind of on your wavelength and stuff. So I really enjoyed this conversation, Vesper. Thank you so much for having it with me. And, maybe we'll do it again, because I feel like this is one where we could just, maybe we'll do it like an Instagram live, just come bring it on, just go on for a long time.
I would love to do that.
But I know you got a book to do. So
and listen, if there's anything I can ever do to help your students, please consider me a resource. And I love this generation. I'm passionate to help them. So
I'm hoping they'll save us.
Yeah.
That's what I'm hoping for. So cool. All right. Thank you so much.
Take care.
This has been Cylinder Radio. The success of this podcast and the educational revolution that I hope you will be a part of is dependent on those who find value in it. Please take a few moments to review us on iTunes so the show is more easily found. If there was a perspective on today's topic that was not highlighted in this episode, or you have an idea for an episode topic that you want to understand more deeply, please email us at cylinderradio@gmail.com. Follow me on Instagram @WillRusch. WILLREUSCH. Thank you for your support, and I look forward to the next one.